So I did something pretty simple. I pulled up the last two housing booms and stuck them on the same chart. Same scale, nothing fancy.
One of them climbs through the early 2000s and tops out in 2006.
The other one gets going in 2020 and tops out in 2022.
And for a while there, they honestly look like the same animal. Both go up fast.
Both go up further than anybody thought they could.
And both of them end with a whole lot of Americans saying the exact same sentence out loud, which is basically, there's no way this holds. Then the two lines go completely separate ways. The 2006 line just falls off the edge. National home prices dropped around 27% from that top, and it took something like 6 years before they found a bottom. Out in Las Vegas and Phoenix, it was closer to half. The 2022 line doesn't do any of that. Mortgage rates roughly doubled. Sales fell apart. Affordability got worse than anything the 2006 boom ever managed to cook up. And prices nationally, they just went flat. This past spring, they were up less than 1% from the year before. Same setup, totally different ending. One quick note, there's more than one way to measure home prices. Here, I'm using the repeat sales index, which tracks the same homes over time. And that's the measure behind that 27% drop. Okay, so I spent a while trying to figure out what's actually different between these two, down at the level of the machinery. Because if you understand what made 2008 happen, you can go look at right now and check whether those same parts are sitting under the hood. Here's what I found. Let's start with what really is the same, because the similarity isn't made up. Both times, you got a genuine affordability shock. Both times, prices ran way out ahead of what a normal paycheck could carry. And both times, the people trying to buy their first place ended up doing math that just didn't work. I lived through the first one as a homeowner. And I've watched my own kids try to price out the second one. Watch the down payment number run away from them faster than they could save toward it. So believe me, I don't take either one of these lightly. And in both cases, most people landed on the same conclusion, right? If buyers can't afford these prices, then prices have to come down. That's a totally reasonable thing to believe. It's also not how the last crash actually worked. See, home prices are stubborn going down. If you're a seller and somebody throws you a lowball offer, you've got an option that a guy holding a stock does not have. You can say no. Pull the listing, sit tight another year, rent it out, wait it out. And when most sellers can do that, a weak market shows up as fewer sales, houses sitting longer, price cuts, sellers throwing in concessions, prices sag a bit, they don't collapse. To get a 27% drop across the whole country, you need something else entirely. You need a big pile of people who cannot say no. Sellers who had the choice taken away from them. That's the whole thing right there, forced selling. And people usually flatten this part out when they retell 2008. High prices did not cause the crash. What caused it was how all those purchases got financed. By 2006, subprime loans were more than 20% of new mortgages. And by 2005, the median combined loan-to-value on a subprime purchase loan had reached 100%. A huge share of buyers had almost no equity cushion from day one. A lot of these were adjustable rate loans with a starter rate that was set to jump after 2 or 3 years. And plenty of people were counting on refinancing before that reset ever hit, using the equity that rising prices had just handed them for free. Paying the higher rate was never part of the plan. That plan works beautifully under exactly one condition, and it's that prices keep going up. So prices flattened, and the escape hatch slammed shut. No appreciation meant no refinance. No refinance meant the reset landed right on your head. And you had no equity to sell into because you started at zero. Now watch how fast this thing compounds. By the end of 2009, 26% of mortgaged homes in America were underwater. Mortgage delinquencies peaked at just over 10%, and unemployment was sitting around 10% too. That's the combination that matters. Homeowners with no equity, missed payments, and disappearing income. And there was somewhere for all of that to land. Months of supply went above 11. Builders had spent the whole boom building right into it. That part flipped completely afterward, by the way. Housing construction collapsed after the crash and stayed depressed for years. So the oversupply that helped bury 2008 eventually turned into the undersupply everybody's been arguing about ever since. But the mechanism underneath all of it is simple. A foreclosure doesn't hold out for a good offer. The servicer just sells it to clear the thing off the books. And that cheap sale becomes the next appraisal comp on your street, which pushes the neighbor underwater, which creates the next forced sale. And that's how you get a cascade. So now let's put today's numbers up against all that. Total mortgage delinquencies are about 4.5% today. The 2010 peak was just over 10. Foreclosure starts are still only a fraction of the 2009 peak. Negative equity is about 2% of mortgaged homes. In 2009, it was 26%.
And honestly, homeowner equity is the number that really splits these two eras apart. Owners with mortgages are sitting on record levels of equity, and the average loan-to-value ratio is around 43%. After the crash, it was north of 70. Unemployment in July was 4.1%. Now, hiring has clearly gone soft, and I'll come back to that. But 4.1 is not 10.
And I want to be straight with you about the other side of this, because it's real. Foreclosures are going up, and FHA delinquencies have been climbing too, especially among loans written in 2022 and 2023.
That's first-time buyers, small down payments, bought at high rates, genuine stress, and worth watching closely.
But let's scale it honestly. We're still nowhere close to the level of mortgage distress that defined 2009 and 2010. So then, where did the correction actually go? Because there was one. This market absolutely took a hit. It just paid in a different currency. Roughly 3/4 of American homeowners with a mortgage are still sitting below 6%. More than half are under 4%. So if you own a house at 3% and you sell it, you're volunteering to go buy your next one at 6.5%.
For most people, that math is ugly enough that they just stay put, even when they'd rather move.
That's the lock-in effect, and it's why this whole downturn looks so strange. Instead of a flood of sellers, we got a shortage of them.
Existing home sales have been running around 4 million a year,
Against a peak of over 7 million back in 2005. 3 straight years at the weakest sales numbers since 1995. The correction showed up in volume.
prices stayed put, and the market basically froze solid.
And that adjustment is showing up everywhere except the headline price. Listings sit and sit.
Sellers quietly dropped the asking price a few weeks in.
Buyers ask for closing costs, repairs, a rate buy down, and they get them.
Most home builders are running incentives right now
Because a builder can't sit and wait. He's got inventory parked on a balance sheet. And plenty of regular homeowners tested the market, didn't like it, and just pulled the listing.
Every single one of those is the market saying no to the price.
And not one of them shows up as a price decline. There's a second, quieter correction underneath all this too.
Adjusted for inflation, national home prices have now fallen 12 months in a row. Nominal prices creeping up around 1% while inflation runs near 4%.
So in real terms, housing is getting cheaper, slowly, invisibly, without a single scary headline anywhere.
One more thing.
Because the national number is hiding a lot. The second you stop treating the country as one market, it falls apart. This spring, Chicago home prices were up almost 7% from a year earlier. New York, over 4%. Meanwhile, Las Vegas, Seattle, Denver, and Tampa were all down.
Parts of Florida, Texas, and the Southwest have been posting year-over-year declines,
Usually single digits, not double. Broadly speaking, the places that built the most and the places where insurance and carrying costs got ugly, those are the ones softening. The places that built almost nothing are still grinding higher. Blend them into one national figure, and you've described basically nobody's actual neighborhood. So what would it take? I'm not going to sit here and hand you a number for next year. Nobody's got one worth listening to. But you can absolutely know what to watch. Because the mechanism tells you exactly which gauges matter. For this to start rhyming with 2008, you'd need 4 sellers. So watch what makes them. Jobs first. Everything runs through employment.
payrolls actually shrank in July.
And the 2 months before that got revised down by more than 100,000 combined. That's the single most important line on the board. A household that keeps its income keeps its house.
Then delinquencies, and especially FHA and those 2022 and 2023 loans where the strain is already showing.
Then foreclosure starts. Not filings in some headline, the rate.
0.24% creeping toward 1% would be a genuinely different market.
Then negative equity.
At 43% average loan to value,
A 5% price drop pushes fewer than 200,000 homes underwater. That's a cushion. Then months of supply. We're around 4.5. 2008 went past 11. And then lock-in itself, which is already wearing off. There are now more mortgages above 6% than below 3%. Every year that keeps up, the freeze thaws a little more, and more owners can move without eating a financial hit.
now if those things don't line up together,
The likelier path is the boring one. Nominal prices roughly flat, incomes and inflation slowly catching up, real affordability improving a few percent a year, and real declines showing up in specific regions instead of nationally. That's just a much slower repair than most people are hoping for, by the way. Years, not months. The economist I found most useful in all this, Lisa Sturdivant over at Bright MLS, put the goal about as plainly as you can, which is getting monthly housing payments back in line with income growth. She doesn't see a crash coming because the ingredients aren't in the bowl. She does see a correction, and she figures it takes years. So where does that leave us? Two booms. Two peaks that felt nearly identical if you were standing inside them. One got financed in a way that manufactured 4 sellers on a timer. The other got financed by people who mostly locked in cheap fixed-rate debt and piled up more equity than any generation of homeowners on record. That one difference is most of the story. So next time a thumbnail promises you a crash, you don't have to argue with it. Just go check the gauges. Jobs, delinquencies, foreclosure starts, equity, supply. A housing market that's brutally hard to buy into and a housing market that's about to fall apart are two different things. Right now, the data says we're sitting firmly in the first one. I'll keep watching for the second.